Welcome back to another exciting episode of Undisrupted. Adam, I always wonder what the role of the superintendent is sometimes when it comes to technology, because in my day, my superintendents that I've had have played different roles. Some have been heavily influencing, meaning they're like asking and pushing and talking to tech companies and getting me connected. Others have been like, Carl, whatever you want to do, we'll support it. We'll trust you. What do you think the role of the superintendent should be when it comes to like technology? And that's what a lot of our leaders are listening to and looking for.
Gosh, there's so many angles to go on that. And I have to be careful because I have a superintendent that I work for. That is an amazing superintendent, by the way. And did I ever mention to you that she was the Georgia Superintendent of the Year and a finalist for the National Superintendent of the Year?
She listens to this podcast.
No, but seriously, the superintendent has to be in tune with their CTO, technology director. You don't necessarily have to know where all the wires are buried, but you have to understand short-term and long-term goals of your technology department, because all the stuff that we're doing here requires approval, support, and money. And the superintendent's role is to make sure that that money gets where it needs to be. There's no technology initiative that you're going to do that's not going to be something that's not going to be in the millions. So when you're talking about millions, a lot of these things require bond referendums or taxes or whatever the thing is that you do in your district. So the superintendent has to have a clear understanding of where you're going with all this stuff, not all the ins and outs, but has to have that. If not, then you are going to be in a horrible situation as a tech leader.
And also they need to know who to go to when their PowerPoint presentation doesn't work. And
oh, and also like who to sign into their email on their phone.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I got this new phone. How do I get my email?
Who to set up their wireless printer at their house. I mean, these are all things that may or may not have been happened by yours truly. But speaking of superintendents and school leaders, I want to invite up onto the podcast. We have Doug Roberts joining us. Doug, come on camera there. He is the founder and CEO for the Institute for Education Innovation. You can follow him at Doug Roberts _IEI. Doug, welcome to the show.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
What are your thoughts on that debate, that opening topic, like the role of soups when it comes to like tech purchases? Do they need to kind of know everything? What do you? How are your views? Because you work with them all the time.
Yeah, superintendents are the keepers of alignment to strategy. They're the folks, because I always say they have one of the hardest jobs in America because they don't have any colleagues. They've got bosses who are politicians, Board of Ed are elected official politicians. We all know how crazy that can be.
Yeah.
And then they've got people looking to them for guidance and leadership, some of whom may be gunning for their job, right? So they have to kind of sit in the middle there. And so their role, I think, is to understand all those parts, plus the public-facing piece, the community, the PTA council, all the principals. So their role here is to field solutions based on the alignment to the strategic goals, to where things sit in sort of both the capital and operating budgets, and find the right ideas from people that they can trust, build that trust in terms of a kind of executive to executive relationship, and then facilitate the process for the team to then dig into the details and vet the solution, right? I don't know too many superintendents who make top-down decisions. We are buying this, but it's more like, all right, what happens a lot, what they tell me a lot is that tech director will go off to an FETC or an ISTE or a local tech conference and come back looking like they've seen a unicorn. You won't believe the thing I found, right? Right. And that may or may not be, the tech director, is rightfully trying to find really great tech. But the board may be in a totally different place. And the tech director may not know that because this happened in some board meeting that people didn't pay attention to, or in an offhand conversation with the board president, or something else that he or she's not privy to. Superintendents can make sure to check the box on alignment to our overall mission and strategy. Now, tech team, curriculum team, everyone else, teachers, everybody, go vet this thing. And if you think it's good, I know how to pay for it.
Yeah, that's so true. That relationship between the tech director and the superintendent is so important, because they'll let you know whether or not this is the right time to ask. It's like, oh, no, this is not the time, because like you said, there's some stuff going on the board right now, or there may be a seat coming up right now, and now's not the time to push for that. Let's just wait, or some change maybe in the wind.
Or sometimes the most like innovative, like groundbreaking, game-changing technology solution may not be the right solution because of timing, because it's not kind of fully aligned with the biggest challenge in the district. Sometimes the tech director may not see. Here's a great one in terms of like sort of like hardware-based operational technology. Tech director might be thinking, I got to get like all these great devices and stuff so that every kid can do can do remote learning if we need to go to remote, or kids in secondary who learn better at remote can do so in a virtual school environment, right? That's a great and noble thing for a tech director to think. The superintendent might be thinking, I'm looking at the state legislature about to give us a bunch of money to get rid of Wi-Fi deserts in our district, make sure every kid can connect at home. And so that's the tech. We can't go buy devices till we make sure that all the kids can connect at home. And so one can come before the other. And it's, it all comes down to, I guess, communication and that's how the two kind of play off each other.
Well, that kind of takes me to like the next thing I want to ask you. You work with a lot of superintendents in your current role. So can you tell me, like, what does the world of the superintendent look like right now with all this political pressure with masks and, as you mentioned, connectivity, we have CRT, we have books, all these things are being thrown at superintendents right now. So and we don't want to lose these good people. So tell me, what does the world look like for Soup?
We're losing people. It's harder than it's ever been. For the vast majority of them, I think there have been superintendents who have had to deal with this kind of political strife and tension from day one. Yeah. And the truth that the challenging thing about our work and our business is that for the superintendents that look like me, white dudes, they're much less likely to face this kind of tension. Their average tenure in the job is just statistically much longer.
Really?
Sure. Yeah. The term optics, I heard the term optics from a bunch of superintendents when I started IEI. I'm not sure if I can go to that, that big, nice hotel where we're going to have nice dinner because it might look bad back at home. I only used to hear that from superintendents of color. Now I hear it from everybody. So I hope that there is an opportunity or a learning opportunity for us to look forward and say, okay, look, now everybody's kind of experienced this thing that only some of us used to experience. Let's eradicate this inequity in district leadership together. Let's try to educate board members, educate community members about how different it can be to walk in different shoes in this job. So everyone's feeling the stress now. And so I think everyone maybe has greater understanding and maybe we could see some progress there. The other thing that we're seeing is just there's immense pressure on superintendents right now to justify, and it's not their fault, to justify all the money that's coming in. The national media has made such a big play, right, for their purposes of selling whatever they're selling, cable subscriptions or whatever. And then national political movements and parties, et cetera, are trying to make their case about whether the current president's economic recovery plan is good or bad. And so schools end up being the battleground for this. Yeah. And it's sad.
Caught in the crossfire.
Right. And it's like these are institutions trying to teach America's youth, and they're caught in the middle. And so I think superintendents are now, because of all that national media coverage and the pressure that's come with it, they're having to justify how they're spending this money. And they get it on both sides. They get it from people who say, hey, you got all the money, I want you to spend it now. So you're like, buy more stuff. My kid needs this. My school needs this. We need new playgrounds. Right. And those are all noble things to ask for. And then you're getting pressure from others who are saying, you should put that money in savings or use it to fix the roof. And then you have to go through this whole process of explaining you can't use federal ESSER dollars to fix the roof. So everyone's having to educate the public, their individual communities about how this money can and can't be used. And it creates a lot of extra work probably for the district in terms of their community engagement. And what we're seeing, in fact, I've got on our podcast coming out next week two superintendents where I asked them, let's talk about these challenges that are happening at board meetings. And what they both said is that they feel that they put in so much work before maybe others were. They were putting all this work into kind of effective community engagement and communications when maybe it seemed like overkill 2 years ago. Now they're really glad they did it because they're able to more quickly get to here's how the money can and can't be spent. And they're having less drama at their board meetings as a result. And this is, by the way, one district that's doing optional masks, one that's doing all masks, and both have the same low level of drama. But, the districts that are doing masks and not doing masks, that's not the determinant of whether you have drama or not. It's more about the nature of the community and how you're communicating.
Well, it's a big thing politically when it makes it on Saturday Night Live, because we saw a couple of weeks ago they had the whole board meeting cold open. I'm like, that's that thing went around text message in our group like wild. I mean, it was just nice to be able to laugh about it. And some of our folks are having those meetings, some are not. Like the district, we have several members whose districts were full remote all or most of last year. So right now, there's no one coming to those districts' board meetings to complain about critical race theory. What they're doing is coming to the board meeting and saying, or they're not coming to the board meeting because they're just glad their kids are in school, right? They're out of house, right? Great job, school district. Everything's relative. And it's either way, none of this stuff was part of the calculus of leading a school district 2 years ago. It requires a lot of strategic thinking and communication thinking that maybe wasn't part of the job a couple of years ago. And there are some really talented folks who are moving on to retirement or early retirement or private sector. And, if you're in a teaching or an AP or principal or other district position right now, and you're thinking about district leadership, this is a time there's going to be a lot of opportunity for great folks to step up. And we're doing our part with our IEI Lead Aspiring Superintendent Institute to try to help develop that next generation of leaders. We just finishing our fall cohort. Our spring cohort starts in January. People can go to ieilead.com if they want to learn about it. But it's a great opportunity to get connected with a strong network of district leaders and learn the ropes. And, not for nothing, we help folks work on their resumes and figure out how to find a job somewhere. So before we get into my next question, give me a quick pitch. What's a 1 minute pitch on IEI? What is it for people that don't know what it is?
I kind of already took 20 seconds out of it. We're a national think tank of school superintendents. We gather superintendents for reflection, thought leadership, help each other get better. The content of our sessions is mostly us. It's my job to kind of organize the members into productive discussions, both large and small group. We also provide the Aspiring Superintendent Institute, IEI Lead, I just talked about. And we are currently in the process of finishing up the first ever that I'm aware industry awards for solution providers that are given out by school superintendents to the industry, called Soup's Choice. And by the time this airs, we'll probably be done with the application process, but people can get info at Soup's Choice, SUPES choice.com. And look out for we're going to give out the awards on December 9th at our hybrid online, virtual and in-person gala, which we'll be broadcasting and giving out awards. We're also going to do some donating to charities of our superintendent members. So we have a lot of fun. It's a really incredible network of people, and I'm really honored to work with them.
That's a great group that is making lots of change, not only locally, but also at the state and national level. So back to your previous point about the communication and all of that and community engagement, tech leaders are the primary listeners of this podcast. What is something we can do if we're listening? If there's a tech leader out there listening, what can they do to support a superintendent when it comes to maybe that community engagement, or when it comes to any of the things, maybe some of the pressures? A lot of it remote. I mean, you talked about getting rid of those Wi-Fi deserts. I love that phrase. What's something that a tech leader could do that's out there listening right now to help us?
I got my notes out now. I'm taking notes.
Right, Adam. I would say first, attend the board meetings if you can, even or listen in virtual, right? If you're not currently somebody who sits in those, try to. And I would say in a lot of cases, you might want to check, if you're not involved, check in on how they're doing the virtual board meetings, because some of these folks are just not that great at it. And it turns out like $100 camera on top of a laptop can do wonders for, showing the whole room and the speakers, et cetera. No, but I think, try to understand kind of what he or she's working on day to day. understand the overall strategy piece, and then try to use your expertise in the different kinds of technologies available to fit those needs. And I think, push back too. Like, superintendents are also guilty of coming to an event like IEI saying, "Oh my gosh, I found this thing," and make sure, like, send your boss into those kinds of opportunities with some parameters about, get them sort of enough knowledge to be dangerous about, like, how are we, and I'm going to get out of my own technical expertise here, but how are we set up, in terms of single sign-on? How are we doing roster integration? Give them the kind of the sort of Cliff Notes version of those basic things, so that help them kind of filter out things that are not going to fit into your architecture. And then lastly, I think just, superintendents are being challenged right now to be warriors for equity on many different levels. And I think, sort of immersing yourself as a tech director into what digital equity looks like. We talked a little bit about, access at home, but what are other things that you can do from a tech perspective to provide equitable opportunities for all kids? I think it's a big important thing that many districts are wrestling with, and we want our tech directors to join that effort, because it's, you can play an important role in getting kids access. So and most of the tech directors I know out there are already pretty kind of creative, dynamic, flexible people ready to roll with the punches. So I think just keep doing that. And those of you who think there are a lot of tech directors who become superintendents, and if you think you got the chops for it, don't rule yourself out just because you come out of the instructional tech world. It can be a really great transition, and all it takes is a willingness to serve and some leadership acumen, and keep it in mind, because we need great people.
Well, I'm going to give you a new title right now. You are now the Superintendent Whisperer.
Yes.
So
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you to give some advice to some of our tech leaders out there that are currently, like, not a member of, like, the superintendent's cabinet. And as we've kind of stated before, a lot of this stuff you have to have proximity to have those conversations at times. So what advice would you give to a tech leader that's not a part of this inner circle, if you will, on how to become part of that inner circle, or to kind of have that superintendent's ear?
That's a good one. I'd say, so the thing I started off with, plug into their world, plug into those board meetings, just sit in the audience, listen in, make yourself known, that just demonstrate that you get the seriousness of this work, and you share the passion and the commitment. And, it doesn't hurt that, a board member or two might see you sitting there too and go, like, "Oh, look at Adam's been coming to the board meetings. I know he works here. That's, what's his role again?" Right. Like that never hurts. But I think, the other thing is to always steer. One of the knocks on tech directors is that they can be too feature focused, too hardware focused. Right. And that's an important part of the job. Making things go, but try to think more about kind of the overall instructional plan and where solutions can fit. Avoid getting too excited avoid like nerding out too much on like cool gadgets, right? Like, and then to the extent that if you're a tech director who doesn't have an instructional background, then I think a good idea would be to go, sort of try to beef up your sort of instructional credentials, right? Like, if you've never been a teacher, for example, like getting your like doing the sort of graduate work to become a teacher, and being willing to take on some classes, and understanding the pedagogical side of the house can help if you want to move up that ladder. Or just sort of just at least being empathetic and listening to it, and really understanding that side of it, because you have that kind of comprehensive approach, then you can be an instructional technology leader. And many districts have, they'll have like the large urban districts with lots of kids, they'll have a CIO who's like hardware, infrastructure, IT, and then they'll have a chief of like instructional technology or something. And so, But in a smaller district, sometimes the CIO is also the head of instructional technology. And so having a rudimentary understanding of the instructional side of the house can help greatly.
I think just getting into classrooms even, I mean, is a big, I mean, not even having to, not even going to get in the, I've seen a lot of times where, and you can tell, and Adam and I work with tech leaders, and we've of course been them too. But it's the ones that get it are the ones that are out of their office. And I think some of the things you were saying is a big part of that, like going and being present at the board meetings, going and being kind of that ear, or I even like the idea of what you're saying about giving kind of a high level overview of, here are some general terms that the school leader might need to know, because when they're up there at that board meeting getting peppered with questions, it's great for them to have some knowledge. It's like, yeah, we just discussed this, and we're talking about beefing up our infrastructure. We're talking about, they don't have to know the exact, like what kind of fiber we're running, what do the switches look like in the closets, but and I think
I was going to say, Carl, sorry to cut you off, but
that's okay.
Just assume that the soup is always going to be going to events where they're going to be learning about new stuff and getting, these kind of like events like IEI, where it's CEOs and superintendents. It's like these kind of executive think tank kind of things. They're always going to be going to them. You might just say, hey, I'm just curious if you're going to any events, can I share with you what we're working on here? This might help you filter and prioritize your time when you go to your next thing. I think that they appreciate going in with some knowledge so that they don't waste anyone's time back in the district.
Yeah, that is extremely valuable advice. And you talked earlier about the funds that are coming in, whether the mainstream media, how they want to play it. Obviously, right now with ESSER funds, all the levels of them coming in, a lot of those funds have already been earmarked. They've been dedicated to learning loss or whatever it is. But, technology plays a huge role in those funds. So my question isn't about the funds themselves, because, everyone's going to have their priorities for that. And the thing is, those run out, right? 2024, they'll be gone before then, I bet. But how do we make it so that leaders out there realize that technology needs to be sustainable, like somehow, because what we've done is like we are tooth and nail with the bond cycle here in Texas. So it's if we miss a bond, those devices go another year, and we're so tied to those votes that it's not a part of it's not like the air conditioning, it's not like the electricity. How do we implore that on our leadership to say, like, yeah, this is now not just a one-off, it's got to be part of the future?
In other words, how do you get them to increase funding locally to match what the feds are putting in?
Well, just the sustainability part. How do we know? And it doesn't necessarily always have to be, I don't know. I guess some schools have done it different ways, but I guess maybe instead of getting technical about it, like how do you actually do the line items in your budget? Like, how do we make them aware of the importance of that sustainability? Because I think sometimes, and not all, most of them have figured this out by now. Actually, the pandemic helped us quite a bit. Fortunately or unfortunately, now they realize, oh wait, we need to have this on a regular basis. I guess how do we help them know that? But then also on the flip side, going back to your other point, how do we get that communication out to the public?
Yeah, well, that's what's challenging about this. And so, we work with the great Jess Gartner of Alloview, who does sort of education and financial tech solutions, and she's been preaching, just sort of as an advisor and financial guru to our members and other superintendents around the country. She's been preaching that you slow roll this money, because if you spend it all in one year, the public's going to expect that money is there, and then you're going to look like the bad guy or lady when next year all that money's not there. So she's telling everybody to spread it out over. You have the ability to spread it out over 4 years. So that's one, I think, just wise piece of advice. Secondly, part of what comes into play here too is these superintendent contract cycles, right? That's always the most talked about contract. And so where you are in your contract could, and what position you're in, you might advocate spending more upfront if you're trying to, win hearts and minds and get a contract negotiated. I think the good ones will focus on what's best for the kids, but the reality is that sometimes that can play a role here. So understanding that is important. But I think more solution providers are going with, or providing options at least, for spreading out hardware costs like they do for software licenses. And so I think solution providers are helping to make it easier in a lot of cases by offering that as an option. Like, instead of paying big upfront and then a smaller maintenance fee, you can just spread it out over time, or they're doing hardware lease programs. Mm-hmm. I think that those kinds of models are helping everybody kind of get better at the budgeting piece. But it's one of these challenges we always have around hardware and software capital versus operating. The other thing I think is that, if the one of the silver linings of this pandemic is that it's been laid bare how many kids don't have access to the internet at their homes, and how important infrastructure is, and how they don't have access to devices. So we have to, and it's like, I've known that, you've known that, but the average Joe or Jane is seeing that on the TV news now, that, wow, there are places that, a lot of, like, I didn't know that parts of cities and rural areas just didn't have internet access at all. I always assumed there was some way to connect. So, that's now happening. And you have, a board of ed and a superintendent should take this political opportunity to go lobby and a lot of them are doing, a lot of our folks are out getting state legislatures to start appropriating more money so that we can have access to better tech solutions. Because I think the thing to do is not say, and the media is not helping. The thing is not to say, look at this embarrassment of riches of all this tech stuff. And like some districts who are not focused, who are not buying within their kind of strategic plan, may be feeding this by saying, let's buy this thing and that thing and that thing. And all the vendors, it must be working, because a lot of them are like MailChimping the what out of people. Spend your ESSER money, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. In the subject line. Yep.
And that's not helping with the thing that you just brought up. Like if you spend wisely, and if districts hold on to that cash over multiple years and spend it on things that are really going to help achieve the goal, then I think you do a better job of educating people that, look, this is not an embarrassment of riches. We're not just throwing money away. This is only a single digit percentage point increase in funding. And we're probably, still far off from where we should be if we were going to fund our schools. You can pick your country, Finland or Sweden or whatever, or your local private school. So, what we're doing, this is not Daddy Warbucks bathing in dollar bills. What we're doing is we're trying to level up and correct a great inequity that has been foisted upon our public schools for many years.
Amen. It's catching up. It's closing the gap. It's not, you're right. It is not an embarrassment of riches that sometimes that we've been painted. We've been getting cut for years and decades. We're finally catching up. Well, I want to thank you, Doug, for joining us. And for the listeners out there, how can they follow you and find your great work?
Thank you, guys. It's an honor to be on. You can go to ieik12.com, instituteforedinnovation.com, Twitter at IEI_K12. And, my team and I were all over LinkedIn. My name is Doug Roberts. You can find me on LinkedIn. And you can follow the Soup's Choice Awards at soupschoice.com.
Looking forward to that coming out in December. That's right. We check out and see what the Soups are picking. Well, this has been the Undisrupted podcast, brought to you by Future Ready Schools. He's Adam, and you can follow him at AskAdam3.
And he's Carl, and you can follow him at Mr. Hooker. And remember, we are better together.
And we are better undisrupted. This podcast is made possible by the generous support of Amazon Web Services.